Thanks for choosing this free Anfield Index podcast. If you'd prefer to listen to this or any of our other shows without adverts, then now's the time to check out Anfield Index Pro. With AI Pro, you can supercharge your entire listening experience. You'll not only get all of our podcasts without the ads, but you'll have them far faster with our Quick Publish feature available exclusively for subscribers. AI Pro also puts you in the heart of our sound studio, with an option to listen to many of our shows live and interact with the podcasters in real time as the shows are recording. Upgrading couldn't be easier. AI Pro is available on all popular podcast platforms, and we have our own apps for Apple and Android. Just head on over to AnfieldIndexPro.com and get started today.
Hello and welcome back to the Mindfield podcast from Anfield Index Pro, your sports psychology podcast where we delve into all things LFC and the mind and how it interacts with the pitch. As always, I am joined by my co-host, Mr. Andrew Vincent. Dr. Andrew Vincent. Doctor, how are you doing?
That was a really nice intro.
Thanks.
The mind and how it interacts with the pitch. I'm inspired now, so let's dig in. That's how I'm doing.
Oh, he's inspired, guys. We better watch out. This could be an interesting one. So we're recording this in the middle of the start of the international break, which is light relief for a lot of people. A lot of people hate it because the real football isn't happening, but we're doing it on the back of a win, which is something we want to touch on and address, because we were talking the last time about maybe the challenges from the psychological perspective that the players and the coaches have been experiencing, and how that has played out in terms of intensity on the pitch. And obviously, Jurgen Klopp listened to the last Mindfield podcast and got the whole team to listen to it, and the lads took a lot of inspiration from your words. So well done, Andrew, on your well-deserved victory against Ajax. But as a fan, but also as a fan with a sports psychology hat, did you notice any big changes in the way we went about our business against Ajax?
The big thing is, like, we looked like us. Identity was back. To steal a phrase from the much maligned Pep and Linders, our identity is intensity. And that was back. Like, that was noticeable. So, like, I think that would have been the biggest thing I wanted to see, is, like, it doesn't need to be complicated. It just needs to be everyone doing the things that we recognize. It doesn't even need to be the case that the execution of that is perfect. As long as it's recognizable, that's an important step forward. So I think that my impression is that was very much recognizable. I thought we saw some effort from people that maybe we hadn't seen it from. And, whether or not that's about motivation or about, just getting a few things straightened out that allowed people to apply that intensity appropriately. Not sure, but that's the biggest and most important thing, is being recognizable and then getting a win after being recognizable, because that just reinforces this idea that our identity is effective.
And do you place much importance on the narrative that is around a lot at times when it comes close to an international break or a break in the season? Is there a lot of weight in getting that victory just before you break up, as opposed to experiencing a draw or defeat, do you think?
I think if you lose, then you say maybe the break is good for everyone. And if you win, then you say nice to go into the break on a winning note. So, I think either way, like, the story of the break is kind of what you want it to be. In this case, I think it was important for us to win that game just because there's been so little football because of the postponements we've had, and to, get our identity on track. But, I think at the same time, if something had happened and we had lost that game or drawn that game, just having a little bit of a foothold in terms of looking like ourselves again was the most important piece. And I think would have been enough to give us a positive step into that break. And I think maybe it's good that some of the players are away a little bit, and as long as everyone comes back healthy, then sometimes this kind of break can just be a nice reset and you go somewhere else. There's like a, I don't know if people have had this experience maybe, but like sometimes when you're in the middle of something or you're pushing really hard for something and things get a little bit frustrating, like you take a break, even like a couple days or a couple weeks, and you come back to it and it's surprising how much easier it feels. Or you change something and like then you come back and you notice that all of a sudden it's like, oh, actually this is coming much more naturally. And so I think the break probably will allow for a bit of that too. You know, people go somewhere else, they play a slightly different role, they're around slightly different people. You come back to the original context, just slightly shifted, having a different lens and perspective. I think that can be a good thing. Tired maybe, but like that shift in perspective can be super important.
Yeah, definitely for me, very similar to what you were saying there watching it. I was of the impression that the process was back, like you said, the identity. But for me, I think no matter what the result was, obviously it wouldn't have been good to have a defeat or even a draw, but how they played, so how they did what they did, was more recognizable for what we are used to seeing from this group of players, which I think was more important than anything else, or certainly as important as anything else as well. So yeah. I think having that experience and that the performance as much as the result is going to allow them to come back recognizing themselves and knowing that we can still do what we have been used to doing. And because I could imagine for individuals, you know, they probably look at their performance and go, what's happening? What's happening for me, or what's happening for the team? Like, why are we not performing? You know, and that's where fingers can begin to be pointed, because we as human beings look for, I won't say we look for narratives, but we look for meaning, or we look for explanations. And look, there's no better person in the world for me to be sitting down having this conversation with, given your background in philosophy and psychology. But do you think that there is an importance there for the players on an individual basis, and maybe the coaching staff as well, when it comes to looking at narratives? Or do you think as professionals they are less likely to be impacted by narratives or looking for explanations than, say, we would be as, you know, the average fan?
I think that everyone's going to be looking for meaning in narratives. That's part of why sports psychology has a role, is because players can get themselves tied into absolute knots trying to tell themselves a coherent story about why they're playing the way they're playing. That being said, like within the team atmosphere, like there's going to be a huge difference in the kinds of narratives that are going around, the kinds of stories that are going around. They have more information, you know, like they're there, like so there's going to be like more truth to those, probably to some extent. You know, like for whatever reason, I've continued to read the transfer chat. And like there's a lot of concern that Pep Linders has become like a behind the scenes force for disruption of what was otherwise a really steady system. And I think like that's a good example of, for all I know, that could absolutely be true. Like I have no idea. I sort of doubt it, but like it could absolutely be true. But like that's the kind of thing, like if that's not going on behind the scenes, there's not going to be a lot of players like making that kind of speculation. You know, like the players in the groups and the staff, like they're all talking to each other. Narratives happen also through communication, right? So we have shared narratives, which provide like a little bit of a gravitational force. Like usually there's a majority of people who share a common narrative to the extent that like a whole group can kind of share some sort of common narrative. You know, that helps everyone get on the same page. So I think if there's a clear story of why was the start to the season problematic, what's gone wrong here, how can we fix it, and what comes next, like there's not going to be a lot of speculation and issue there in terms of asking questions or pointing fingers. It's just everyone's on the same page. So in the ideal world, you have a common story within the team. In a group where there's going to be more issues, there's probably several different narratives that go around, or, everyone's got their own idea, and that creates some issues. But, from the fan side, we want to know what's going on too. We want to make sense of what's going on too. And from the outsider perspective, like, there's even more gaps we need to fill with our own ideas and our own theories and our own speculation. And that doesn't mean we're always wrong. It certainly doesn't mean we're always right. But, of course, we're going to try to fill in those gaps with whatever we think. And sometimes, fan speculation might have a greater tendency to get carried away.
Hmm. And I suppose that's because there is an opportunity possibly because there is such a lack of actual insight among the fans group, and then we don't know what to believe or what to trust. So, my best friend's cousin's sister's aunt's dog, was running past the training ground and, heard Linder's fighting with Klopp. Maybe that's actually what happened. Maybe it's not. And there is that lack of context. But let's step away from sport for a split second, I want to ask you, from your kind of experience or your study, like, why do human beings look for meaning or narrative or answers to something that they logically know that they don't have enough information available to them to actually make an informed decision?
Well, I think the second part of that, saying I don't actually have enough information available to make an informed decision, is typically not part of human thought process.
Okay, so most people don't do that.
Right. Well, right, because I think there's a couple different versions of this, right? And so, from like a survival standpoint, or God, what the heck is it called? It's like the not developmental psychology, but the one that goes all the way back to
evolutionary.
That's the one. Evolutionary psychology. From that perspective, there's a functional aspect to it, right? Which is like, if I'm going through the world and I sort of am trying to make sense of things, and I develop these stories that allows me to remember things. So like, not even a story like, I don't know, like some myth or some, those have their purpose too. But even a story like, oh, I dropped these seeds on the ground here and a plant grew the next year. There's this functional perspective of, oh, these seeds must turn into plants, or this must happen because of this. Therefore this gives us a way of like creating hypotheses, essentially, and then sort of testing those, even if it's in an informal way. Like, you have to have these ideas that this is happening because of this, just for that to happen. And so, like, science is full of these stories that didn't pan out, but those were able to be tested. And history is full of those ideas that didn't pan out, whether it's like the Earth is at the center of the solar system or the universe, or, flies spontaneously generate from meat, or, like all sorts of these different things that turned out to be, of course, not true. It's the best wisdom at the time. And if you don't have those stories, or you don't have those explanations of why, it's really hard to intentionally manipulate your environment. And so, that's part of it, is just functionally, it's part of how we think. We have these schemas, we have these stories. It gives us maps of the world. Those maps of the world allow us to test things out, or to intentionally manipulate things. Sometimes we're right and we keep going. Sometimes we're wrong and we have to change that story, but there's always a new story. The other piece of it is like emotionally protective. And so, having control, or some sense of control, or some sense of stability, is pretty much like a basic human psychological need. And so people struggle when they don't have any sense of what's coming next, that there is no sense of predictability. And stories help us have a sense of what's coming next. Like, this, therefore this, or this happened because of this, like, helps us feel like we have a little bit more control or helps us feel like there's something that we can do. And so, especially that feeling of, I don't know what's coming next and there's nothing I can do about it is like hugely unsettling. And so sometimes it's even just this sense of, I don't know, let me think of something. I'm kind of drawing a blank here, but like, I don't know, like we can even bring it back to football a little bit. Like, something that I imagine is really nice for the coaching staff and the players is they have a bad performance and they think, okay, there's something we can do here. Let me find a problem and then come up with a solution for it. And that makes me feel like I'm doing something. And, that's probably also why there's conversation and speculation, is like even just having these conversations about between fans of what's the problem here helps us feel like we're solving something. So being able to be proactive about your next step requires some sense of narrative. It requires a story of what the issue is. And that is like hugely calming, or at least provides some purposefulness and direction, which is important for people. It's without that, people really start to struggle.
Yeah, I'm listening to you here, fascinated, going to kind of replaying from my own background and stuff like that. And, so I suppose regular listeners will know I work a lot with teenagers and young people. And a lot of the narratives or beliefs that we take on as kids are for survival, like you said, to try and make sense of the world in order to keep ourselves alive and also get other people to protect us. So, if I'm a really nice kid and behave well, then my mum is going to give me dinner tonight, or my dad is not going to throw me out of a moving car, so like, okay, extreme examples, but the child brain cannot process that actually I'm okay and I am capable of taking care of myself and looking after myself. So I need to try and find the narratives that the world around me is telling me in order to keep me safe and alive and provide some sort of structure and boundaries for me, because I don't know I can take care of myself. So I need someone to put those boundaries in place until I learn that I can take care of myself, and I don't need those boundaries, right? But society-wise, we need boundaries to know that we are safe and, like you said, provide that security for us. And then I'm listening to you as the football fan, and okay, none of us know that Liverpool doing well or not doing well is life or death situation for us. But it does or can significantly impact our mood and how we interact in the world around us, and we have zero control over that. So I have friends whose partners have turned around to them and said, it's either me or the football, as in, I can't live with you when the results don't go the way of the team that you support, and I'm not putting up with it anymore. And I've had other friends who go, my week is ruined. Liverpool lost at the weekend. My week is ruined. So I am giving myself permission to be a grumpy fucker for the rest of the week. And I have a justifiable reason for it, because the thing that's completely out of my control didn't go the way I hoped it would go. So that's okay for me to be grumpy.
And that's one of those things too, right? Where it's like, that can feel like your only recourse when you have no control. And so this bothered me. I can't fix it, but I want to show that it bothered me. So my week is actually ruined. I'm going to show that my week is ruined. And maybe it's a little bit performative to just demonstrate that, like, okay, like I care about this a lot. Maybe it's sort of like just that lingering, I can't fix it, and so my emotional energy can't be resolved until this is fixed, which means hopefully we fucking win next week, because otherwise, like, this is just going to keep getting worse. And like, that's part of it with narratives. Like, that's the kind of thing that can sort of happen if there's no opportunity for action or alternative solution, is that like things can linger or feel unresolved. I mean, like, as silly as it is, there's definitely, like, I can remember during the Brendan Rodgers era where I used to play FIFA much more regularly. there were times where like if we played really badly or played in a way or like tactically it was frustrating, like I would go play a game of FIFA and set up the team the way I wanted just to have this sort of like experience that I was in a little bit more control. Like I could just work it out of my system. Like this is how it should have gone. This is how I wanted it. And like that would sort of help. I don't do that anymore, but like, you know, sometimes just even having something like that can feel like, here's what I would have done. Here's how this should have gone. Like, there we go. Resolved. The energy of that is resolved. Like it's sort of worked out of my system. But when that lingers, you know, and that can either linger from we have no resolution or we have no control as fans, or it can linger just be like if there's no apparent solution or apparent narrative. It's, you know, it's probably why plenty of people go online and, you know, spend some time just dumping their complaints out there saying, here's the problem, here's what's going to happen. I don't think that's a terrible thing as long as it doesn't linger for you. Like as long as you're not abusing anybody, like if you want to go somewhere and just like have a rant, like good, get it out of your system. Maybe that feels good. You feel like you've gotten that sort of energy out. You've got some resolution. Someone has heard and understood your complaints, and you've maybe within that rant told a story of, well, here's what's wrong. And that can feel really like, okay, now I understand what's wrong and I can calm down. Or, you know, sometimes what I like about post-match Raw, sometimes what I don't like about it, sometimes what I like about post-match Raw is like it helps me create a story of what went wrong. Like, you know, Dave and Carl, like they often have a really good perspective of what's going on the pitch that just like helps me make sense of, oh, here's the issue. And, you know, sometimes under pressure it's the same way. I'm just like, I don't really understand what's going on here. So just having some sense helps me feel like, okay, like at least I understand it. And sometimes that's more relaxing for certain people than others. Like, you know, different people have different ways of interacting with the world, but like making sense of something can be soothing or I guess calming, or at least like take the edge off of that anxiety and angst that comes from having no narrative at all.
Yeah. And, you know, in fairness, we will doff our caps to post-match Raw because they record straight after a match, and I do admire their ability to be relatively objective given the emotion of most of the time. You know, in fairness, like I don't know if I'd be that clear thinking. I have that much clear thought if it was if I was on it. But the other piece that I do want to touch on is purpose. So for any of the people I've worked with who maybe are very low, you know, there may be a high anxiety or, you know, levels of depression or whatever that they might be experiencing. A lot of the time is that they have no purpose, or they have no sense of what their purpose is. And I genuinely believe that we all have a reason to be here. Like there is a reason why we come onto this planet. And as long as we work towards that purpose or try and figure it out, then, you know, for the most part, we're not going to go far wrong. And I'm wondering, is there a potential at the start of this season that the purpose and the execution of that purpose for the season became muddied or muddled, you know, because it is a narrative, and that's where I'm taking this thought process from. The narrative that we've had to change our style of play to fit Darwin Núñez, and Darwin Núñez going to cost €100 million or £100 million, whatever it is. So we need to change our system, all right? And that means Mo is different, and Harvey's different, and you know, everyone's different. Trent's different. Could that be a challenge where the purpose has shifted and the players haven't bought into that new purpose? Or that is it maybe as simple as the execution just hasn't gone the way we would have expected, given the injuries and, you know, dips, or, you know, not lack of fitness, but the potential tiredness that's there could influence?
I think, you know, if we were going to make sort of an impromptu hierarchy here, like there's different, so I'd almost put it as like purpose sits up here at the top as being this big picture. What are we up to? team identity sort of falls below that. As a group, what do we do to achieve that purpose? Individual role falls under team identity as how do I personally contribute to the team and to this bigger picture of purpose. And then, I don't know, there's something under that I maybe will remember. In my head, I have a fourth tier here.
The Linder's effect.
I think in some ways, like the purpose is about winning games or winning trophies, or that's sort of how I see, like, I separate team identity and purpose a little bit, like, and I think the purpose of this group, so sometimes you can have like a problem at that level of purpose. Let's say we won the quadruple last year, and you hear this from players all the time where they talk about when you feel like you've achieved everything, you feel like you've achieved a lot, that sense of purpose becomes really different. So when Liverpool hadn't won a title in 30 years, winning that first title creates a really purposeful atmosphere. This is what we're driving for. Now this group has won every trophy at some point. Like, I think there's a really strong sense that they want to win one of the big ones again, that they wish they had won one last year. So I think at the level of purpose, like, there's a lot of really good direction that this group has. That's my sense. Like, they don't get the feeling that this group feels like they've achieved all that they could achieve. Like, they haven't actualized their ability yet. And I think as good as they have been for prolonged stretches, they have not seen the payoff of that in terms of major trophies the way I think most of us as fans would say they were capable of winning a few more. And I think within the camp, there's probably a realization of that. Coming then to, you're sort of talking about like what I would see is like the intersection of team identity and purpose, because you have new players and a new generation that's coming in. Part of that is about this purpose of like, we have to turn over the team a little bit in order to be competitive for those trophies. I think probably like then where not the dysfunction, but where the changes have happened this year are team identity and player role. And I just think it's an adjustment. I don't know if it's dissatisfaction with that so much as people needing to come to grips with those things. And just like clearly some mistakes that were made along the way, probably pretty minor mistakes. And, we've talked about it a few times on different pods. When you have a bunch of factors that come together, it's important to not too heavily weight any one of those, but to consider all of those and how those affect the product on the pitch and the sense of narrative. And so it's like really, really important, did we look more like ourselves last game? Yes. Is one of the reasons for that we rediscovered our identity? Perhaps. Is it just that we had Jota playing center forward and we had Thiago back on the field? That could be too. If you took them out, would the identity look really sloppy again? Maybe. And so like that's one of those things where in the one sense, it's really easy to say, oh, good, we rediscovered something and we're back at it now. But it might also just be those two players made all the difference, and it's hard for us to know, or anyone to really know what the reality is there. Yeah. So like I think looking at it just from all of those different things and how those play into narrative and how those play into individual roles and this broader sense of purpose, I think we're okay at the purpose level. I think identity has shifted a little bit. That probably had bigger implications for individuals than we were able to figure out in a short period of time while other things were simultaneously going wrong. And so like if we had had everyone healthy and we had I don't know, like a couple of those games we could have won, like maybe one of those results goes our way, even though we didn't play great, like things feel probably a lot different. And maybe it allows those players to settle into these new roles in a totally different way. Maybe they still aren't quite settled, but we have more points and, things aren't quite so frustrating. So it's important to like play around with details too and see how this story could come together differently. And sometimes that also like considering alternative narratives is a nice way of getting some perspective and also like just kind of, I don't know, cooling things off a little bit, maybe.
Yeah, but we also, when we challenge ourselves and challenge our beliefs, that provides an opportunity for growth as well. So, if we stay the same, and actually this kind of leads nicely into, your favorite thing on Discord, which is the transfer chat. Like, do you think that, so if we look at, okay, we have to look at Man City at the moment, right? They have kept such a consistent level of performance over the last 5 to 7 years. It's been nothing short of phenomenal. Like, and I hate to say that, right? And while money has allowed them to, buy the level of player and pay the level of player that maybe is beyond where we could do it, right? That still needs to be knit in. That still needs to fit into the identity of the team and the fabric. And yes, better players can probably adapt much easier, but it's not guaranteed, right? But one of the things I'm wondering, City versus us, is what's your take on, they have continually tried to improve their first team year on year by adding players that will challenge the existing players that are there for a first team position. Whereas a lot of fans will feel that we haven't done that, except in break glass situations. And could that have a negative impact on the motivation levels, again, which is something that's thrown at players, but also at the where people can get a bit stale in the role that they're in?
So my take on this, I was thinking about this the other day. I think it has a lot to do with the way that team identity is reflective of manager personality, and club policy then becomes reflective of manager personality, especially when you have really exceptional people who end up with a lot of control and sway the way Pep Guardiola and Klopp both have. And I think part of it also comes down to the way they solve problems, or the way they see how do you achieve victory. But also just, for them personally, Pep's a problem solver. Like, he wins a lot of games, but I don't necessarily think he definitely cares about winning, but he wants to solve soccer.
Yeah.
Right? That's how he approaches the sport, is what is the right way to do this? What is the approach? How do you drill that approach and create a team that functionally does this magnificently? And so that's what his groups have been doing. And I think within that, player personalities aren't quite as important. You can chop and change a little bit, because what you're really focused on is a way of playing that you get. And so that falls in line with Man City. You find the best people to play these certain roles, but anyone can sort of be put into these roles. And so especially with Man City, you just get the best players you can find, you try them out in these roles. And then as long as you have someone who's brilliant at solving soccer, which Pep is, you're going to have a pretty good level of success. Because he's got the right ideas and evolves them well and can train them well. I think some of the things you hear here and there are that he can be really interpersonally good, but he can also be interpersonally not very good and kind of icy to certain people. But, that's just how he operates. I think, Klopp, on the other hand, Klopp's perspective, I think, comes largely from his experience at lower level soccer and comes from his time managing minds. And one of his ideas is that if you can create a really good energy within the group, where everyone feels important and everyone is working together, then the level of effort you can get from that group surpasses the sum of its parts and allows you to elevate everyone and outwork everyone. And that's where you'll find success. And I think, I'd mentioned this to someone in the Minefield Discord chat, actually, that his experience as a lower league player, when you're working with less talent, it's more important that everyone is elevated, and context can bring so much out of players. And it's not necessarily because when you get to lower levels of talent, or you get to something like League Two in Germany, where everyone there is talented, but not as complete, is what I would say. It's more important to create systems that bring out individual strengths, and to really focus on that individual strengths and sort of like ignore some of those downsides. And so I think in Klopp's perspective and the way he approaches the sport is like people and the way they affect the overall group have more importance than they would for Guardiola. And it's why someone like Milner or someone like Henderson or someone who's maybe interpersonally brings a lot out of the people around them becomes harder for him to drop than it would Guardiola. Guardiola's trying to solve soccer. He needs someone who can perform the role. If they can't perform the role, then they're out. On Klopp's side, I think you might have someone who can perform the role better than someone else, but he's probably also just really attentive to how people are affecting the overall group. The sense of group energy and intensity like matters a lot more. Group energy as it pertains to intensity, but individual leadership and as it brings out the intensity of the group is a much bigger part of how he sees the game. And so I think that's maybe how team identities are reflected in like the individual backgrounds and approaches of those two people. This is a psychological deep dive, I think, Al. I think this is, we're in the weeds here.
We are in the weeds, but it's I was going to say it's really important. Maybe it's not important. It's interesting. Put it that way. Right?
It's interesting, I think.
Yeah.
But,
So I'm curious then. Is there potential for the current group of players to finish their careers and say they don't win any other major trophies between now and when they leave Liverpool, right? For them to go away and go, I wish I played for Pep because I would have more trophies and more medals in my medal cabinet.
Of course, there's always a possibility, right? I think the other part of that, though, there's going to be a lot of Guardiola players who will walk away and say, I wish I played for Klopp. You know?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that might be a little bit of a grass is always greener thing. A little bit of a, I wonder what I would have been able to get out of myself. I wonder what they would have been able to get out of me. Maybe it's about trophies. And you're looking at purpose here, too. Like at the end of your career, if you're looking back at how many trophies did I win? What did we not win? What was left on the table? Maybe you're looking at, okay, that was, I would have wish I was in a Guardiola team. But then maybe you look back at your career and you were just like, hey, we had this awesome atmosphere in this team and we accomplished some great things. We fell short a couple times, but like I have this unbelievable relationship with Klopp, which a lot of his players feel like they do. I was part of this mentality monsters thing. I was like, we achieved a lot and maybe that's enough for people. So it really just depends. And I think, maybe you win a bunch of stuff over in, I wonder what Raheem Sterling thinks sometimes.
Okay.
I wonder if he wishes he had hung out and played for Klopp. He would have been awesome under Klopp, I think. Really awesome.
I think so too.
And I think he would have been loved, which he's never really been. Maybe he had a good relationship with Pep in some ways, but like it doesn't necessarily seem like it. He never really, as good as he was there, he was always a little bit dispensable, it seemed like. And that's why he's in Chelsea now. And I think Klopp creates players who are indispensable and makes them feel really good about that. He would have been that for Klopp. He would have been unbelievable. And I wonder if he looks at that and he thinks like what I could have been there would have been exactly what I wanted, and
rather than having the medals in the trophy cabinet.
Yeah. Well, because like I know for a fact it matters to player how big of a role did you play in that medal. Some of those Premier League titles are going to be more important for Sterling than others.
Mm.
And like the ones you play a big role in matter more. It's not just about, hey, did we win this? It's about, did I play the role I wanted to play that I feel like I could play? Like, was this group getting the best out of me? too. Like that matters a lot to players. And so I think, like, you know, one of the things Klopp does well is makes people feel important. And so, you know, even if you weren't playing the most central role in that team, you know, probably in a Klopp team, you might feel more important than you would in a Guardiola team, where probably the system is a little more supreme than the people. It's not just about, you know, it's not just about relationships with Klopp. It's not just about, I care a ton about all these people. It's also about what that generates in terms of this purpose of winning. And I think he cares about relationships a lot too. But, yeah, so that's how I'd put those things. And I think it does make transitions more difficult in a Klopp group, though. He clearly has trouble letting go of people when they're done. Not like done, but like
not able to service the position that he needs to the level that he needs them to be able to do it at.
And I mean, he's a force of personality, right? And so I think he sees people who are that force of personality, and part of it is also just a belief in what he brings to the table. His personal strength is having that gravitas. And so when he has those players around who bring that too, he values that a ton. And it's probably the story of his career in certain ways. And like he talks about that, right? Like he says, I was really average or not spectacularly talented as a player, but mentally I was really good. And I think he means that in terms of intelligence, but also in terms of emotionally and in like bringing the best out of people and being a leader. And so it wouldn't, you know, a lot of people have a tendency to overvalue the things that they themselves were good at because they value those things in themselves.
Was that important as well, though? To be able to value the things that you have in yourself?
Well, I mean, of course, like having, we can talk about it with Klopp, but, you know, everyone to some extent is like this, right? Like we see the world through the lens of our own perspective. And so like on the Guardiola side, we've seen him horribly fuck up games trying to be too smart. And his intelligence is what has brought a ton of his success. His ability to problem solve has brought him a lot of success. It's also brought him to some of his biggest failures. And at the same time, that's probably true of Klopp too. It's true of Mourinho. You know, his ability to be like a fucking dickhead, like, and create this really strong, abrasive mentality. He used to be able to like make his whole team as abrasive as he is, you know, and like to create the whole group is our group and everyone outside is abrasive and we're just gonna like fight our way to victory. And now like that's also created some of his worst things. It's just like as his circle gets smaller, everyone dislikes him and it's a me against everyone mentality. I think when you look at the story and the arc of a lot of managers' careers, you see their greatest successes coming from, you know, just sort of the shadow of their own best and worst quality, or their best qualities, also how those become weaknesses in different points. And, you know, those are just three examples of this. We talk about Pep and Klopp a lot.
But I suppose they're both, they're elevating the levels of play, you know, far beyond anyone else over the last 5 years between the two of them. Like nobody, like no other coach in the league who has come and gone in the league has been able to build what they've been able to build.
Yeah, not for a while. For a while.
I can't remember the last, you know, one who's had sustainable, you know, probably Mourinho at Chelsea was probably the last one who was able to build. You know, but like there's been good managers have come and gone, but to be hitting 90 plus points every season, like that's exceptional. It's absolutely exceptional.
Yeah. That's true. I forget how we started this conversation exactly. Oh, in terms of our transition.
Yeah.
And like, you know, some of the things that will be complicated about our transition. And, you know, that's part of why it's really important to have people around you who challenge you too. You know, like, so speaking for myself personally, like I have a decent sense of like my own, it fits well with what I do career wise, which is fortunate. like I love the process of things. Like I love helping people get the best out of themselves. I love solving too. Like I'm a thinker. And so like when I'm working with someone, like if I can help them get their identity sorted and get things on the right track, like I love doing that kind of work and starting with something that feels like a project and like, you know, getting it sorted out. But like once that project is solved, like the actual winning or like the keeping that machine running is sort of less interesting to me, not with my clients as much, because there's always challenges that come up with clients and like maintaining that kind of career. It's like much more difficult to maintain like a high level career than, you know, just getting it running and then keeping it going. But like, you know, I have a close friend of mine just fucking loves winning, you know? And so I know there's times where like, if we swap spots or like, if we were both managing a team, I would be really interested in getting that team to be really good. And then they should fire me and hire him.
I guess.
And like with Klopp, like he's really, like he brought this group and elevated this group a ton. I don't know who the voice of like cutthroat winning is. He should hire, honestly, the person, Dave, would be perfect. No, like seriously, like his thirst for victory is unsurpassed. Like as a balancing out voice, like in a cutthroat voice for just winning, like that would be a good voice to have around. I wonder if there's someone around who's like that right now. Because Pep Linders does not seem like that character. I don't hate Pep Linders. I don't think he's taking the ship. But there needs to be that voice right now because certain people need to go. And I don't know that Klopp can see that super clearly.
Would that leave you concerned for the direction we're going?
Has he ever done it? That's the question. It's year 7. He's never done it. He's never made a really impressive year 8, year 9, year 10, maybe partly because he never had a chance to, like he got a new job or he left, but like, there's an open question there. So this is new ground and maybe he can do it. But some things are going to have to change. And like, you know, one of the big things, like one of the reasons it's important to move on in some ways from a Milner or a Henderson. So I have mixed, a lot of people are like, oh, well, we can't keep these players around just because of their off-field influence, right? Like that's an argument that I hear. And usually like, I'm kind of skeptical of that. I was like, you can have people around for their off-field influence. Often it can be really important. You want to pass down that culture. The problem is when you have really influential people who aren't necessarily on the field or as dominant on the field, you stop people from rising to those roles who are now the dominant people on the field. And so getting rid of them, not to necessarily say that I would advocate for that, like you need a really good sense of what's going on in the group, but allowing some of your really influential people to move on when they're not the most influential people on the field means that people get to rise into those roles. As long as Milner's there, no one gets to be the new Milner. They're taking up space. And like, maybe in a good way, maybe in an effective way, but it also means that space isn't occupied by people who might aid in that transition. And so you need some younger leadership. And I don't know who that is or what that looks like, but like, you know, Milner was a leader on this team when he first came in. I forget how old he was when he first came in, but maybe you want your leaders to be 26, 27, 28, or 22, 23, 24, if you've got the personalities for it, rather than mid-30s.
407.
407. He's younger than me, I think. How old is he?
Is he 36, 37, I think?
Oh, then I got him. I got him by a couple.
You got him.
Yeah.
So what I'm taking from this conversation, Andrew, is that we need to jettison Milner and Henderson and Klopp and get Dave Hendrick in as head coach to actually win the league.
I would not jettison Klopp and bring in Dave Hendrick, although I would be really interested to watch it. I'd be thrilled to watch it. Actually, maybe I would. I don't know. Let's try something new. I think you want to, if I'm in the club, I would really want to know that there is a voice somewhere that can be that cutthroat. And, like if I'm consulted, I might say we need to identify younger leaders and give them space to lead.
Mm-hmm.
And like, if we can't, we have to give them that space. And whether or not that involves keeping Henderson and Milner around, I might even have a conversation with them, and just say, look, like you guys are great. You guys have done a ton for this club. Who do you think are the next voices that can really step in? And can you help them? And can you help them move into that space? And I think that's probably how I would encourage a group to do it, is like, then you get that institutional memory, you get maybe some of their qualities, like they get to pass that down, but also, they're assisting in that transition of leadership rather than being relied on for it.
And maybe that was the plan this year.
Maybe. Yeah, certainly.
And due to injuries, that's hasn't been what has been the case. So I suspect Milner was probably not meant to play as many games as he has played this season. And I think that maybe that was his role, is to help bring those younger lads on and identify who are the ones that can actually step into the role. But the hardest piece, I think, is what you just described, is giving them the space. Us as fans giving them the space, but also their teammates giving them the space as well. And the Milners and the Hendersons giving them the space, because they believe they can do a job.
Right, of course.
They don't want to be replaced necessarily.
Right.
And sometimes we don't always have that ability to detach ourselves from ourselves and look at ourselves in an objective way and go, do you know what? I actually can't do this anymore. Like, it's different in other sports, like say rugby, where physically you're getting hit by people twice your size, and you can't wake up the next morning without being in severe pain. You physically know, okay, I actually can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
It's different in football. So maybe that is the challenge, and maybe that's all of this is in the mix at the moment that is causing some of the challenges that we're seeing the club have to play out through.
Sure. Yeah. I think that's a fair conclusion, is that this group probably needs to figure out how to effectively transition the emotional impetus of the team. If that's at the heart of Klopp's philosophy, then, we need to understand who that becomes. I think there's some really good candidates for that, by the way. Like, I really do. Like, I love the personalities that some of our mid-20s players have, and like Jota, I like the way he approaches the game a lot. Like, I think Trent needs to step into sort of a leadership role. Like, I think that's where he's struggling right now, is like somewhere between being young and being the kid, and being a leader in the group and taking on the responsibility of that. I don't think he quite understands what that looks like for him yet.
Yeah, and he definitely is someone I think would probably need a bit of space to figure that out for himself, not even being directed by Klopp or anyone else to do it. I think he needs to figure out where do I fit right now. I'm not the young upstart coming in who's blowing everyone's socks off. I am part of this, but I am only, 23? Is he 23?
Yeah, he's 23, 24. So.
Like, he's really young.
Well, I imagine too, like, the part of that transition is going from, I'm one of the younger people on this team, which maybe in some ways is still true, right? Because the team has aged with him. So he's still as comparatively, and this is what I mean, as long as Milner and Henderson are there, it's hard for Trent to see himself as a veteran because there's not that turnover. And so, giving him space doesn't necessarily just look like giving him time and a chance to try and fail, although that's an important part of it. It also means someone prompting him to say, hey, your voice matters in the locker room. Or talk more, share your experience more, like push the people around you more, be the one who's directing other people on the field instead of the one who's being directed. And like that, I don't know that that's like really natural for him, but I also think he could be really good at it.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think he definitely could. Andrew, that was a cracker. Even if it's only you and I think it's a cracker, that was a cracker.
Well, yeah.
I really enjoyed it. We got a bit of philosophy in there. We got a bit of evolutionary psychology. You get everything with this podcast.
We lived up to all things bringing the mind to the pitch. I think we lived up to inspirational introduction.
Well, Andrew, thank you so much for your expertise. We really appreciate it. And you subscribers and you free listeners, we hope you're enjoying it. We'd love to get your feedback. Please jump into the Discord channel, the Minefield one, and let us know what you think, and give us any ideas that you might have for any future podcast that we would do, because we've got a World Cup coming up and we want to fill that void. So we're open to suggestions, so please do jump in. And if you're not a subscriber, do subscribe, because you get tons of fantastic content, including Dave Hendrick for Liverpool Manager.
One more aside, I forgot to include Trev when I was talking about the voices of the post-match Raw. I do appreciate his perspective on the game too. The three of them and everyone else who steps in there do a nice job of sorting my thoughts out after those games. So wanted to include him as well, because obviously the one that ties that whole thing together.
Andrew, we've talked up one Navan man. We don't need to talk up two Navan men. They're all inbred and, come all of the same mother and father. Okay, so, and they all have the same cousins, and that's just the way it is. So we'll only talk up one per episode. So we're going to strike that from the record. Trev, no, we might talk you up next time. On that note, right. I'm pulling the plug. I'm upset now. Andrew, have a good one. We'll chat to you all soon.
We hope you enjoyed listening to this Anfield Index show. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel so future podcasts find their way to your device automatically. There's nothing quite like fan engagement, and we'd love to know what you think of anything discussed on this show. The best way to get in touch is over on our free Discord community, where both podcasters and listeners debate the hottest LFC topics 24/7. Sign up free now at AnfieldIndex.com/Discord. You won't regret it. You can also follow us on Twitter at Anfield Index, and find us on Facebook by searching for Anfield Index. Oh, and before you go, we'd love it if you could leave us a 5-star review on your favourite podcast app. It only takes a couple of seconds, and it means the world to the people who create these free shows.